All right. Hey guys, welcome to the Troy Gramling podcast. I am so glad that you're with us today. And whether you're watching or just listening, we're glad you're here. We're talking about everyday leadership and how it really doesn't matter whether you're a mom, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a coach, a police officer, whether you're an entrepreneur. We have talked to all kinds of people about how to more effectively lead at what we're all called to do. So thanks for joining us. And today we have a really exciting guest, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. Ezer, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Pastor. And my name is Ezer Tossas, and I am married to Linda. We've been happily married for 18 years now. We have 3 kids, 16 going on 17. I have another one that's 15 turning on 16 and a 12-year-old daughter. And we've been in South Florida for about now, I want to say 15 years. We're originally from New York City. And we started various companies that today have grown significantly. And we're excited to walk with Christ and be here as a testimony of, what can God do as entrepreneurs and as, a family united.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have an incredible story, and it's and really inspirational when we think about it. And then, I've had great success. So let's start as a little boy, and you think back in the when you were growing up. Were you involved in student government or athlete? Were there any things that you did as just a child or a young man, maybe even in high school, that gave you maybe some insight that you would one day be an entrepreneur or a leader, or did those things come a little bit later in your life?
Well, they definitely did come later. In all honesty, I came from parents that unfortunately were divorced, and very young age I started working. So I didn't have the time to actually be able to, or the time or the resources to be able to join any clubs or any extracurricular activities, because after school I started working at the age of 14. So in all honesty, if I reflect back, I guess people see me nowadays, they assume that I I must have come from maybe money, or that somehow he had influences, he had everything kind of set up for him already. But I guess that's what God does, if you can kind of go backwards in time and see that young kid that was there, that grew up in the inner city and didn't have the resources, probably had everything stacked up against him. It puts you in perspective that, you can definitely, no matter where you're coming from, definitely have a good opportunity, out there.
And that's such a great truth, to be reminded that it's not it may be more challenging for some people than others, depending on what's going on in their environment, but it's possible.
Definitely.
God's given us that opportunity. So you grow up. Tell us how you met your beloved and what happened from there.
Yeah, it was actually through church. I attended a church in New York City that was a mission church that was starting out. My mother used to attend that same church, and Linda at the time she was born in the United States, but she was raised in Colombia. And the church that she went to had recommended her to attend this church in New York City and go to college out there. So she ended up moving to New York, and we met at the church, both of us serving God at that time.
It's interesting, as I've talked to a lot of people, the number of folks who actually met at church, or doing some type of ministry. So that's exciting to hear. So you guys met in New York, and you get married, and you're originally were in education. You were a teacher. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually a career changer. I had got my undergrad degree in forensic psychology. I did that for a while. And then I had a friend,
Before you get going, tell us what forensic psychology is. All right.
I guess it's the study of the criminal mind.
Okay.
So it's the psychology behind why criminals maybe do the things they do.
So you're like one of those TV shows.
Yeah. CSI type,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So I did that for a few years, and then I had a very good friend who was in the education field and actually inspired me to go back to school and get my graduate degrees in education. And I was gonna by then, Linda, we had gotten married and she was pregnant with the first baby. So I started taking a lot of courses at the university for um, child development without really realizing I just kind of wanted to be a better dad. So I would take these courses, but the problem was that I took so many of the courses that midway through the program, I realized that I was specializing in early childhood education, and it was too late for me to kind of switch, courses. So I ended up graduating uh, in early childhood specialty, which was one of the big concentrations that I had. At that moment in time, I didn't realize that I was the only guy kind of in a classroom full of ladies. But later on in life, it became a kind of to my advantage, and today the work that I do today.
All right, so you were a gentleman in a classroom. How did Linda feel about about that? But anyway, so you graduated, and did you teach for a while, season, or?
Yeah, there was a time in my life that I was teaching, and actually in the New York City public school system. And for a long time, I taught in elementary school. And then when we had our second child, and my parents had moved down to South Florida, we decided to move down. And I also taught in North Miami and in both Broward and Miami-Dade on the public school systems as well for a little while, right when we first had came down to South Florida.
So, what did as you think back as a teacher, what are some of the things maybe you learned about people? When you think about have a principal and superintendent and assistant principal, but then you're also, dealing with children, and then you're dealing with those children's parents. So, is there anything that when you think back, some of the things maybe that you learned as a teacher that have helped you even as an entrepreneur and then leading the large company you do?
Yeah, definitely. Once you're dealing with children, you realize that it's the most valuable kind of asset or possession that somebody may have, their children. And at the end of the day, parents at the same time are very concerned with their child, but they're very delicate on kind of what kind of not complaints, but positive reinforcement you want to bring to the child. So one thing I learned very quickly in dealing with parents was always to you want to talk about a positive, then kind of the negative, and then another positive, so that most people are receptive in that sense. And that's something that I've brought over to now managing, big companies like the ones we do, where, if I have to sit down a supervisor or somebody that works very closely to us, I always try to first talk about the great things that you're doing, then, hey, this area I think we can improve in here. And then I add it again with another positive thing, which makes, I think, a lot of people more receptive to kind of the constructive criticism that you want to give them in certain areas. But definitely, I think people let their guard down when you come in first with a negative, and then the positive.
Oh, that's a good reminder to do that, because normally when you sit down to talk with somebody, a lot of times it's the negative that created the meaning. You know what I mean? So that's where your mind is at, and it's easy sometimes to start there and yet be sincere, I would assume, about the good. In other words, you're not making up a good
Correct.
thing.
Correct.
You're sincere in that, so that you can move forward. So you were a teacher, taught there in New York, taught down here for a while, and then I assume something must have happened, because you're still in education
Yeah.
in some sense, and in consulting as well. But so tell us what happened.
So for a while, coming from New York City, I was really frustrated. I would apply to different jobs. I felt like I really didn't have either the right connections or the right resume or the hookup, what I think a lot of people want to think about. So I went through a process, I want to say, of about 2 years, and I was working a full-time job, what felt like two full-time jobs at the time, not understanding kind of why God had me in that situation. And I kind of didn't feel like I was having a breakthrough. And what I didn't realize right then and there was that God was going through my life and kind of teaching me something that I needed to learn at the different company that I was working at, and all the different departments and all the things that I was getting access to that I would have never in a million years been able to access, because it's not something you necessarily learn at a classroom, but it's the full hands-on experience that later on, when we founded our first company, uh, all those resources I was able to get through that hands-on experience and working under these big corporate 500 companies was the tools necessary that I needed in order to establish the business where we did when we started Liner Consulting, which is it's a consulting group that pretty much represents international universities and colleges and everybody in the sector of education, pretty much at a worldwide level. And I needed to have all those skills that I needed to learn at that moment in time. That if I go back in time, I didn't understand why God had me there, but now, if I never went through that process, I would have never learned the experience that I have today.
Yeah. So today, how many employees do you guys have today?
Well, combined between all the companies, I want to say we're over 350 employees that God has allowed us to kind of flourish into, and it's two people, Linda and myself, that we didn't have the money, we didn't have the resources, the connections, or anything, and God definitely allowed us to be in this position now.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people forget that. They forget, they see you today. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They see your success and the markings of success, the opportunities, your presence, and they don't necessarily see what you went through. Not, and I'm talking about just those 2 years. I'm not even talking about building the company. Just those 2 years of frustration where it doesn't feel like you're making, you're stuck, I guess, in a sense. What would you say? Because I know that there are lots of folks listening and watching today that probably find themselves in that same situation. At one time, they had a big dream, and it doesn't, they're afraid, I guess, maybe that they're not going to get there.
I think one of the big things that I learned very early enough is it's not a race for like a sprint. It's more of an endurance and having the persistence. So I think we tend to want to have like a quick microwave solution to things, and I have a goal and kind of put the numbers in, and I want to express to kind of happen. And when it's not happening right at our time, we start getting frustrated, and then we kind of abandon things. And I think that's a really big misconception when we go into anything in life, whether it's a business, a marriage, raising kids. It's a long kind of race where the endurance is more, where you need to be persistent and kind of have longevity and pace yourself, because not everything is going to be uphill, and not everything's going to be downhill either. But you got to kind of prepare yourself that when it's uphill, you kind of keep pushing and don't look back. But when it's downhill, enjoy it, plan. But, there's a season for everything. So definitely, I think that's the major point, that you realize that in anything you go in life, it's not necessarily going to be easy. And I think a misconception I had early on was, I believe in God, I pray, and I go to church, so I shouldn't have that much challenges. And that was a quick a turn, because just because you do that, you still are going to have challenges. The difference is, I think, is that you have resources and tools that God has through prayer and through word and through hearing preachings and everything, that kind of give you that word to get you through every day.
Yeah, and like you said yourself, the challenge is really where the provision. Without the challenge, you wouldn't have the skills that you need to do what you've done.
Correct. Definitely. I mean, a person in the Bible that I kind of reference to, which is a story that I love to read, and still to the day of today, is the life of Moses. Because at so many points in the Bible, we reference the fact that, this is somebody that has had many while he lived with the Pharaoh. And then when he was in the desert, he had nothing. And then, he didn't have all the necessary tools and resources. And at the same time, God always provided to him at every point in time. So I think that's one of the big challenges.
We're going to come back to your story, but before we do, one of the things that's been interesting to me, talking to so many different entrepreneurs and leaders, but especially entrepreneurs, the number of folks who have started with their spouse, because we often hear you shouldn't, family and business and all that kind of stuff. And yet I'm amazed that some of the most successful businesses actually are started a husband and wife team. And so tell me, what are some of what allows you guys to be so effective together? What do you each bring to the table?
I think when we ended up getting married in New York, the person who married us told us, it's like you're going into a business. It's 50-50, and you decide how much you're going to put into it and how much you're going to get out of it. And at the end of the day, a business partner is that you're deciding to go into business with somebody and say, are we both going to put 100%? And then kind of, are we both going to, get the rewards from all the work and effort we're doing? And I think at an early stage also, we identified kind of what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses. And she kind of, makes good on my weaknesses and I cover her weaknesses. So I think we cover each other's back and understand that she's a better administrator and I'm maybe the creator of different things. So we clearly identified our roles and knew, what she would be handling and what I would be handling. But it's similar what we do in the house.
Right.
We both have kind of the roles in the family and we work as a team. Especially with 3 kids, you want to be on top of it. But definitely it's respecting each other and knowing kind of what the strengths and weaknesses are for each other to cover ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's what I've seen. You talk about people get married and opposites attract, and that seems to be true because it is those different skill sets that they don't just bring to the home, but are able to take then into whatever business it is that they decide to get into. And if they have an effective home, it seems like they're able to take it over to the business world because they're operating really within the same gifts in a sense. All right, so you guys, so you're a teacher. There's some frustration, and where do we go from there?
So I had a professor that worked at a university, and then she had connected me with somebody, and she had said, this person needs your help. And actually, it was a neighbor who was an entrepreneur himself, who pretty much was a mentor while we were both like watering our grasses on Saturdays. And, he was the one kind of being, hey, you want to have these basic things because, coming from the field of psychology and education, I never had taken a business course, never did an Excel sheet, done anything related to business. But at the same time, I think God allows you to necessarily put the right people in your place that kind of prepare you. And, we did our best job representing that one client at that moment in time. And then other clients started coming to us. And it was really a connection that God allowed it. I mean, it wasn't necessarily anything else than us. When we did our job, we wanted to make sure we did it correctly and that we did it, with all the, like if you were doing it for God at the end of the day. But I think that was what caused, our reputation to start growing and spreading like a wildfire at the end of the day internationally. And, after there, very quickly, we started going to different countries and representing people from different countries and in the United States. So it just kind of all unfolded very easily. But understanding that it was kind of a gift from God and you want to be grateful when you don't have and when you do have. So always keeping that good balance.
So this multi-million-dollar business, over 350 employees, began with your neighbor who, while you guys were watering your yard. Now, most people, right, you had working a couple of jobs, so you're not coming home, you're coming home tired. So what caused you to take the time to actually get to know your neighbor?
Well, we are personally, Linda and myself, I don't know if we're extroverts or, we tend to just say hello, but we don't necessarily initiate conversations. This particular neighbor was very friendly. And, I understood after that moment in time that God allows certain people to come in our life, whether for a short-term or a long-term season, but he puts the right people in your path so many times. And, we pray for God, show me how. And sometimes I think we're waiting for God to use a speaker and say, make a left, but it necessarily doesn't happen that way. It's a more subtle way with putting the right people at the right time in your life. And you just want to be, receptive to when that situation does occur.
I mean, that's just incredible. Have you ever thought like where you might be had you decided to use automatic sprinklers?
Definitely, you tend to, go back and reflect that, so many times I did have fears and doubts of myself. And if I would have let that kind of feed and that fire grow, I would have never been able to, do anything of the stuff that we did. And it's balancing out your fear and knowing that you have to trust in God, because I think it's very easy if we had everything scripted and all the guarantees, then it would, everybody would be doing it. But when you're an entrepreneur, you're kind of going to the unknown, kind of what Moses did. He went into the desert hoping that there was going to be a way out. And that's how entrepreneurs do at the end of the day. Many businesses there's nothing guaranteed, but you're going with the expectation of that. So I think that's definitely a principle that, has definitely kept us in line to success.
It's amazing to wonder how many people who are frustrated as you're listening today or watching and have missed, it's right in front of them, but they're so focused on their frustration that they've missed the neighbor or the person on the bus or, subway or whatever it is that God's actually brought to them with the answers. Now, I know in the midst of building a company, you're also living life, and the kids got their stuff and all of that. And then I know you have gone, got interrupted with a medical emergency in a sense. I don't want to run out of time, but can you tell us a little bit about that? Because just again, another amazing story.
Yeah, definitely during the COVID time, I had gone to the doctor and through a regular routine type of scenario, and I was pretty much given 9 months to live. I was having liver failure that was causing all my organs to pretty much shut down. And I was with Linda in the emergency room when they gave us that diagnosis. I remember not sharing it with my parents or anybody because there was no necessary solution. I was going to be placed on a waiting list for organ donations, and I was like number 65,000, something. But it definitely put your life in perspective, because we were on a high of necessarily growing company, establishing businesses. Everything in our life was perfect. Kids are perfect. I had no reason to see that coming. And it was definitely a curveball that shook our floor. And I remember, they had us prepare funeral arrangements. I had to, organize the whole final side of it, because they said, probability was that you could end up passing away. And I remember preparing all of that and also telling God that I'm not ready to leave yet. There's so much stuff that I want to be able to do. And when I got the call that there was an organ available because of my blood type, I went through the process. But right before I got the phone call, I didn't have the solution yet. We didn't have an answer. There wasn't a clear path. You just had to trust God that there was going to be an organ provided. And, trusting in God is, we hear it in the Sunday preachings, we hear it in, in different areas. But when you have the opportunity to do it, I could have decided right then and there if I'm going to get mad at God or if I'm going to trust God that he's going to have the right solution and something is going to come positive out of this. And today has been 3 years since I'm a liver transplant survivor, and I have more energy than my kids, and I've been skiing. I've been doing a whole bunch of stuff that I would have never in a million years thought I was going to be doing again. But definitely it's putting that life in perspective of you want to be grateful in the good and in the bad. It's very quick to maybe blame God when some things are not going your way, or only look for God when you need God. But at the same time, when things are going good, that's when you also have to be real holding on and preparing, because like I mentioned in the beginning, there's highs and lows, and you just want to be ready at all times, because it's not a clear path that you're not going to have any problems. Just because I go to church doesn't mean I'm going to be like exempt of everything. At the end of the day, that's part of life. And the big tool that I think God gives us is, going to a good church, a Bible-based church, and reading the Bible, because kind of the tools are all there. There's so many scriptures that you can read one day today and it means something for your heart and your life. And then you read the same scripture in a week and it means something completely different. So I think applying that to your life and your everyday walk is kind of the tool necessary to be successful in your business, in personal life, in your marriage, with your kids, because I think that's the best tool that God left us.
That is just, incredible to think that you were instructed to get all that stuff, in order, and have to emotionally, walk through that. And I think a lot of times, we all tend to think that that's someday, and as a result, we're not necessarily prepared today for whatever might happen. And I think that's such a good point. I know I'm always trying to, where are you at today? Because you don't know what phone call you're going to get. You don't know what's going to take place. And it's in that moment you're going to need the strength. You're not going to have time, then to get things, the way you need them. Let's do it today, so that we can either take them to success or hang on to them, like you said, during the challenging times. Now, during that is, what role did Linda play as far as the encouragement, and how did y'all work together in that, as far as just the emotional side of dealing with it?
There was moments that I kind of felt defeated and definitely felt like, pretty much just no more
Yes.
tools. And I think she had to pick up my weakness in that moment in time and pray necessarily for me and say, I'm here, and do whatever it needs to get done to kind of keep everything afloat. So I think that's part of, having a great partner, in the sense of, when somebody needs help and, the other person has to kind of lift them up, it's that role. And in this particular, situation, it was my wife. But so many people are in different type of partnerships of, so many sort, but you want to be there when the person needs you. And definitely it was a moment of, I was trusting in God. I was also very afraid. I didn't see a way out at all. I had plenty of people that were positive around me and everything, but definitely,
But it wasn't their liver. You know what I mean?
pretty much. But definitely you do realize that also. I think an important tool is surrounding yourself around your life, around positive people that see the cup, half full always, and inspiring you. Because I think if you surround yourself with people that are pulling you down or are negative, it's very easy to get contagious with that. But if you are with people that, everything could be crumbling down, but they're saying, keep moving, stay positive, it does encourage. So I think who you surround yourself is very important as well, because that's kind of when you need it. They're the ones that are going to give you that good advice or bad advice in that same sense.
So are you intentional in that? I mean, when you think about surrounding yourself, so are you, do you think through that process of who you're going to give your time to and who you're not? Really, sometimes is the more difficult. Everybody's asking for something always, but the ability to say, I've only got so much time, and I'm going to intentionally be here or there.
Definitely, who I choose to pretty much keep very close to me and let them inspire me, it tends to be usually older people in my personal life. I feel more stimulated in the sense that, they've gone through life, how they handle themselves in hard situations, definitely is what inspires me. So definitely in my suggestion in my walk with life and with Christ, is surrounding yourself with people that, have a fear of God, because it does keep you grounded, and not to do certain things that maybe you would, if somebody didn't keep you around you grounded. And then people that have the vision and, that definitely want to keep moving forward, and they're not afraid to, start new projects, and where everybody sees there's nothing there, they're like, yeah, we can definitely see the project happening here.
No, that's awesome. Now I know why you spend some time with me, because you spend time with old people. Today, I don't know when you guys are watching or listening, but today happens to be my birthday. I'm not going to tell you which one, but next year I turn 50. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. Hey, thanks so much for sharing. I mean, you need to put it down on a book or something, because you guys have an incredible story, and it's so exciting to get to hear it, and it's inspirational. It really is. And so I thank you for sharing it with me, and I'm so glad he's got to share it with you guys as well. I want to thank you once again so much for tuning in to the Troy Gramling podcast. Why don't you share it? This is a story somebody needs to hear. They're about to give up, and maybe God's got their neighbor with a water hose that's got the answer that they need. So be sure and share it, and we'll see you next Thursday right here on the Troy Gramling podcast.